Well, I worked on the Verity skiffs when I was a kid. I started at Woodcliff Avenue 80 years ago. I got the Bill's Fish Market because I found his dog. He had a German Shepherd that was lost in Baldwin. Brought it home. My father read an ad on wanted and said we have to return the dog. It broke my heart. So we went down to Woodcliff. At the foot of Woodcliff was Bill's Fish Market, owned by three brothers. It was Bill, Johnny, and Marco. And they took the dog and said, "You can come down here anytime, kid." And I started working for them as a kid and hanging out. They taught me a little bit. And I started working on the Verity skiffs. I lived in Baldwin and really understood what they were about. I remember 40 boxes of fish. That's in those days, 100 pounds to a box. They were wood boxes. They weren't cardboard. And they would come in with 40 boxes. And I was 4,000 pounds of fish, plus the nets and the gear. And I figured out, watching them come in the inlet when there was no jetties before World War II. There was no jetties, and when you got to the inlet, you decide you want to go the east way or the west way, depending on the weather. And I worked on those boats, coming in the inlet, in the breakers, loaded with fish. So when I decided to cross the ocean, which was a midlife crisis, I copied those boats. I actually took a 26-foot Verity, turned it upside down, and this is the way you make a mold for a boat. Sand it down, make it as fair as you can, and you make a mold out of it, and we produce those Verity skiffs. And in those days, outboard motors, and now we're talking 1985, so outboard motors were mostly for smaller boats, and we were trying to promote Evinrude motors. We're Evinrude dealers since 1950, so that's 65 years ago. And we wanted to show that these motors were dependable. Outboard motors had a reputation of using a lot of fuel, being not so dependable, and if we could do something to promote the business with two outboards on a larger boat, we felt it would be good for business, and I used that as an excuse. So I took the regular 26, I put a pair of outboard brackets on the stern, put a pair of 65s. Now, wondering about carrying fuel, you gotta figure there's no gas stations in the ocean, and we didn't have money enough to have an escort or to have any drop fuel, so we had to carry about 700 to 800 gallons of fuel. Now I know it's 6 pounds to a gallon roughly, and I know the boats could carry 4,000 pounds of fish and survive. That would be winter and summer fishing. They could get that much codfish in the 1930s. So I figured we could put 4,000 pounds of fuel on the boat and survive. The motors were burning 2 gallons an hour at 3,000 RPM. We only ran one engine at a time. And we ran 24 hours a day. So you got 48 gallons a day, 480 gallons in 10 days, and 15, 20 days if you didn't make your first landfall, you were out of gas. So the problem was that we were starting out from Newfoundland, heading for Ireland, the town of Killybegs, where they had a lot of bars and we were going to have a big celebration. But as we left Newfoundland, we found we were wasting fuel trying to fight our way north and keep this northeast. And we had to let the boat go wherever the current and wherever the wind really needed the most fuel efficient. So we ended up, instead of going to Ireland, which was like 1,700 miles maybe, we ended up in Lisbon, Portugal, which was over 3,000 miles. And that doesn't say much for the navigator on the boat. But we did stop in the Azores, which was a good stop.
Now,
And we got fuel there.
now Al, I remember that at the very, very beginning, you almost didn't make the trip. You want to tell people why?
Mostly because of my wife. We had about a 2-year battle about making this trip.
That wasn't what I was referring to. I was referring to the first leg of your trip. Something happened, and you ended up having to switch out. You were going to take 2 boats, I believe, and
Yeah,
something happened to one of those boats.
This was really stupid. I thought it would be great to take 2 boats. If one boat broke down, the other boat would help. And we rigged them exactly the same. We had, in those days, the GPSs weren't really efficient. They had early satellite navigators, but there were so few satellites, you couldn't get a good fix. So the second boat, we're trailing these boats from Freeport to Newfoundland, because if you know St. John's, Newfoundland is the closest place you can get to Ireland. And on the way up through Maine, the second boat jackknifed and the boat got flipped off the trailer into the ravine there, and it became a total loss. And I called up my wife, I said, we're not going. And then she said, great, come on home, we'll forget about it. She's still talking with the divorce lawyer at the time. So I went to a motel, I got my crew, I had 4 guys, and these kids were going for no pay. 2 of them did the rigging on the boat. There was no pay, they were just crazy enough to go aboard. My other son, Al, was running the second boat. So after we picked up all the pieces and shook it up, I said, we still got 1 boat. We can salvage the stuff and send these 2 guys home. And my son Al would go with me. So I called my wife back. I said, we're going again. She said, come on home, forget about it. But we went. Second car burnt out the transmission. We never got to Newfoundland. It burned out in Nova Scotia. And again, we're on the side of the road with no transmission. And I got a wrecker to come and hook up to the trailer and tow us to a town in Nova Scotia. And we launched in Nova Scotia and then took off to Newfoundland. So really, if you analyze it, you couldn't keep together with 2 boats crossing the ocean in bad weather. That was a disaster. So the elimination of the second boat was a very big lesson. You're running 24 hours a night in bad weather at night, and you'd be looking for the other guy, and he'd be looking for you. The trip would have been a disaster. So is that what you mean?
Yes. Now, you also encountered a storm or 2 along the way. You want to tell us how you coped with that?
There's an island off of Newfoundland called St. Pierre. It's owned by the French. And it was a little better jumping off spot. So although I said Newfoundland, probably you don't know about St. Pierre, but St. Pierre is a fishing island that the French kept for that fishing fleet. So we went over there to get our final fuel, because in the outports of Newfoundland, we were buying gasoline out of 55-gallon drums and worrying about the water and their fuel. In St. Pierre, they had a much cleaner setup. They'd send a tank truck right down was there, and that was a Frenchman on the dock getting a haircut, sitting up there by his sailboat. He didn't speak English, and I didn't speak French. We managed to communicate where you're going. I said Europe, and he just looked at us, shook his head. Finally, we got friendly. He said, "Look, I'm going to Europe too." So we'll keep in touch on the radio, and I did all the way across. He was never in sight because sailboats don't go the same way motorboats go. But what was the question?
The storm that you hit.
Oh, okay. So we started out, and it was northeast, and you know, you're running at night, and it's pitch black, as any guys that have been fishing offshore, you know, you don't see anything. And I went aft to try to put down the 9.9, which you had to do manually. The two engines, the larger engines, are tipped up electrically. You can do a whole thing from in the pilot house, start them, stop them, tip it up. The little engine, which I wanted to use to save fuel, you had to push it by hand. So as you push down on these engines, you should know there's a little release lever that you have to release it if it's going to go down. After 50 years of working on these things, I forgot that. So I'm pushing with all my might. Now I'm really getting mad at this engine. It won't go down. So I gave it one of these 200-pound things, and the engine went down, and I did a flip overboard. So the boat's going down, and my, you know, sailing along with the one engine, and my kid is asleep in the cabin. So yeah, we had rules, you know, we had very safety rules. I mean, number one, there was a cable running from the forward mast to the stern. We wore Jim Bowie jackets with safety hooks. Never leave the cabin without a life jacket. Don't leave without your safety hook. Don't leave without waking up the other guy. We did it all wrong. He stayed asleep. I wore no jacket, no book. So the boat's going on, and I yelled loud as I could yell, and I don't think it was my yell that woke him up, because he's in the cabin, down low. It was a little trunk cabin. You lay on the floor. That's where you slept. But he woke up, and he turned around. He looked at me. He come out a hatch. We couldn't come out the sides. The boat was all covered. We tried to come out a hatch. He looked up, and I think he thought about it a few minutes. He said, "You know, I could get rid of the old man now after all these years of aggravation." But the boat was set up that the two engines would not steer. These twin larger engines were locked dead ahead. Because if you want to use an autopilot and running day and night, you need an autopilot. The autopilot, to turn two outboards that are locked together, would have been a tremendous amount of resistance, and your batteries were always running low. You couldn't use that much current. We found out late as we're going on this trip, the 65s only had 10 amps alternators, maximum output. We had 4 heavy-duty batteries running all this other accessories plus bilge pumps, and we found out that the batteries were going dead after they get down to 11 volts. Your electronics get all screwed up. So we hooked the autopilot to a rudder, which was under the boat from the original inboard installation. A rudder could just move very easily compared to the two engines. The point is, he couldn't turn the boat around very fast. The boat is now hundreds of yards away from me, and he finally gets the little rudder going, and the boat makes a great big circle. And I really think it was a miracle that he could find me. He came back. And we climbed back on the boat. We sat down and said, "Now let's talk this over. We're not gonna do that again. But we hit two storms that I thought on the Grand Banks. It was really high-breaking, nasty seas. And we drift in the bad weather. The motors come out of the water. The propellers come out of the water. So you're wasting time. You drift, and with a verity, you can drift with the stern to the sea because the boat is built to ride following seas without approaching. So we would drift through the storms, and then on the 17th of August, 1985, my French friend who always says, no problem, no problem. Claude calls me and he says, we have a problem. There's a hurricane coming from Bermuda, heading for the Azores. And I called my wife, she knew about the hurricane, she told me where it is. We had what they call a single sideband radio, which is capable of worldwide communication. And I call my wife every night, and she didn't know that all the other ships in the world can hear your conversation. So it's like, I love you, honey, and I miss you, come on. And then some big foreigner on some steamship gets, who the hell is talking? So we hit this hurricane. It was named Claudette, and the captain of the boat, we called him Captain Claude. His name was Claude. And when we reached land, his friend who took us to his restaurant was Claudio. So I'm afraid of anything that starts with the C. It has a bad omen. But we got the news that the hurricane was coming our way. And all we could do at that point, I carried a small steadying sail forward, and I could reach that sail. It actually was a sunfish mast, which was unstayed. It was an aluminum mast with a small triangular sail. I set that sail so that the bow would have more tendency to stay downwind, because if the sail would help you as a steadying sail and also keep the bow going away from the wind. So we rode it out that way. It was about a day and a half. And the weird thing at night is hoping and thinking that all these seas are going to be uniform, is after getting hit in the stern time after turn with these breakers, one of them would hit you in the side, and I couldn't get it. It would hit so hard you'd think it was a bulldozer that just came alongside. But we rode it out, and we got to the Azores, and I called my wife and I said, I quit. Al quit. He disappeared. I got off the boat. The boat was a mess. I was a mess. I called up my wife. I said, honey, I'm coming home. It's the end. What did she say? You have to finish this trip. I said, I'm dying over here. You know, if you come home without doing this, you're going to be miserable. I'm miserable anyway. So she gave me the encouragement and said, stay right there. I'm sending Dante, my second son, who didn't want to go and fought to see it. Put him on a plane, send him over, and he took it from there. We went to Lisbon, Portugal. After that, we took it up the canals from Europe, through the Rhone Canal, up through France, the Rhone to Rhine Canal, into the Rhine River, through Germany, through Holland, through the Eiffel, through the Kiel Canal, across Denmark, into Sweden, up to Norway, to Oslo, where we had the boat hauled out of the water and trucked up to all the avenues